A ranger tells you to turn around. The road is closed. That's all the information you get. No explanation, no timeline. Just a quiet, unyielding authority standing between you and one of America's most iconic landscapes. That's the story you see online. A secret closure. An official who won't say why. But the truth is not a conspiracy. It is an indictment of the ground you are standing on. On July 23rd, 2024, at 10:19 in the morning, the visitor boardwalk at Biscuit Basin was a scene of quiet tourism. Phones were out. Pictures were being taken. Minutes later, the ground beneath that boardwalk detonated. It threw a column of boiling water, mud, and grapefruit-sized rocks 600 feet into the air. What was a picturesque hot spring became a crater. What was a footpath was gone. The rangers didn't close it to hide something. They closed it because the earth tried to put a hole in the sky. If a ranger turned you away from a road like this, what would you do? Most people would suspect something's being hidden. Let us know your first reaction in the comments below. We go deep into stories like this every week. Stories where the simple explanation is never the whole picture. And the truth is, a huge number of you who watch and love these videos are not subscribed. If you value this kind of deep dive storytelling, take 1 second to hit that subscribe button. It genuinely keeps this channel alive. It is the single most important thing you can do to support this work. Now, let's begin. Yellowstone National Park is not a theme park. It is a deception. It presents a landscape of serene forests, majestic mountains, and wandering herds of bison. A postcard of stability. But beneath that thin, fragile crust of soil and lodgepole pine, the planet's fury is held in a state of arrested development. A colossal magma chamber, miles deep, heats the entire region like a planetary stove element. And that heat is what makes Yellowstone what it is. Over 465 active geysers, thousands of hot springs, fumaroles, and bubbling mud pots. These are not tourist attractions. They are safety valves for a system under impossible pressure, and sometimes the safety valves fail. The events at Biscuit Basin were not volcanic. Michael Poland, the scientist in charge of the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory, is quick to emphasize this. The volcano alert level remains at normal. The aviation color code is green. This was not magma rising to the surface. It was something far more unpredictable. They call it a hydrothermal explosion. The science is both elegant and terrifying. The superheated water that circulates beneath Yellowstone is rich in dissolved silica, a mineral that leaches from the volcanic rock. As this water reaches the surface and cools, that silica precipitates out, depositing a mineral called sinter. Over time, these deposits can line the inside of a hot spring's plumbing, narrowing the vent. Sometimes they seal it completely. The water below is trapped. The heat from the magma chamber continues to pour in, but the water can no longer boil. The immense pressure of the rock and water above it keeps it in a liquid state, superheated to temperatures well beyond its normal boiling point. It becomes a geological bomb. All it needs is a trigger, a slight drop in pressure, a minor ground tremor, some change in the system that cracks the seal. When that happens, the pressure is released. The superheated water flashes instantly into steam, expanding its volume by over 1,000 times in a fraction of a second. The result is not an eruption. It is a detonation, an explosion of steam, water, and shattered rock fired straight up from the ground with the force of a cannon. And as the USGs stated in July 2024, these events are notoriously hard to predict. They may not give warning signs at all. This is not a new phenomenon. It is written into the park's very geography. In 1880, the Excelsior Geyser in Midway Geyser Basin began a series of monster explosions, one of which was measured at 300 feet high and 300 feet wide, tearing a massive crater in the earth. In 1989, Porkchop Geyser in the Norris Geyser Basin, a feature that had been docile for decades, suddenly exploded, throwing rocks over 200 feet. The park had to build a new trail around the blast zone. So the ground isn't just hot, it's a pressure cooker with a faulty lid. The question you have to ask is what other parts of the park are one bad seal away from detonating? If you've been to Yellowstone, Tell us in the comments which geothermal feature felt the most alive to you, or the most dangerous. The morning of July 23, 2024, was unremarkable. Tourists were walking the boardwalk that loops through Biscuit Basin, a thermal area 2 miles up the road from Old Faithful. They were admiring the brilliant blue of Sapphire Pool and the simmering quiet of Black Diamond Pool. What they could not see was the silica seal that had been slowly cementing itself shut, deep inside Black Diamond's throat. They could not feel the pressure building foot by agonizing foot beneath the surface. At 10:19 a.m., that seal failed. The explosion was catastrophic. The blast obliterated a section of the wooden boardwalk. It ejected a plume of debris nearly 600 feet high, taller than the Washington Monument. The fallout rained down for hundreds of feet in every direction. A scalding mix of near-boiling water and mud, littered with rocks, some the size of dinner plates. Jefferson Hungerford, the park geologist for Yellowstone, was one of the first on the scene. His team assessed a landscape transformed, a new crater, larger and more violent than the pool that had been there before. The ground was littered with pale, angular rocks. But it's what those rocks were that told the real story. They were not the strong, rhyolite bedrock that forms the deep foundation of Yellowstone. They were glacial till, loose sand and gravel left behind by Ice Age glaciers, material from just beneath the surface. The explosion hadn't been powerful enough to breach the deep bedrock. It was a shallow blast, a skin-deep wound on the face of the earth, and that was somehow more terrifying. It meant the cap holding down these subterranean pressures was shockingly thin. You were not walking on solid ground in Yellowstone. You were walking on a fragile lid. The National Park Service did what it always does in the face of an immediate, unambiguous hazard. It closed the area indefinitely. Rangers were posted. Barriers went up. The reason wasn't a secret. It was self-evident. A portion of the park had just tried to kill somebody. It was only by sheer dumb luck that no one was standing on that exact section of boardwalk at that exact second. Park closures are not a conspiracy. They are a constant, rolling negotiation with a landscape that is actively hostile to human life. It's a stark reminder that this isn't a theme park. It's a wilderness that operates on its own terms. If you're finding this look behind the curtain valuable, give this video a like. And if you know someone who loves Yellowstone, share this with them. It changes how you see the place. The hydrothermal threat is just one reason a ranger might turn your car around. There are other dangers in Yellowstone, dangers that are very much alive and very much hungry. On May 4th, 2026, the MPs abruptly closed a series of trails, backcountry campsites, and fishing access points just west of the already closed Biscuit Basin. The official release was brief: emergency closure to investigate a bear caused human injury. The Park Service runs what are called Bear Management Areas, or BMAs. These are vast swaths of prime grizzly habitat, often centered on areas where the bears are known to congregate, like spawning streams or fields of carb-rich moth colonies. These areas are closed to all human entry, not to punish people, but to protect bears from people, to give them space to live, feed, and raise cubs without the constant stress of human encounters. But there is a darker, more pragmatic reason for some of the most secret closures, a reason the Park Service doesn't advertise on its maps. Yellowstone has to deal with hundreds of road-killed animals every year: elk, bison, deer, struck by the 4.8 million visitors who drive through the park. Leaving a 1,200-pound bison carcass to rot by the side of the Grand Loop Road is not an option. It would draw every grizzly and wolf for miles into a direct and guaranteed conflict with tourists pulling over for selfies. So, rangers have a specific, unglamorous job. They haul these carcasses to designated, off-limits carcass dump sites. These are hidden, remote locations, closed to the public, where the park's apex predators can feed undisturbed. When you see a section of a backcountry road suddenly gated with a closed for management activities sign, it's not always about a rock slide or a washed-out bridge. Sometimes, it is because that road leads to the deadliest dumpster in North America. It is a brutally efficient system. It keeps the bears fed, it keeps them away from the high-traffic tourist corridors, and it disposes of a messy problem. But it requires secrecy. It requires areas of the park that are simply and permanently off-limits. The Truth Rangers won't tell you isn't a government cover-up. It's that they just dumped a dead elk down the road and they'd prefer the local grizzly bear tear it apart in peace, rather than tearing apart you or your minivan. The closures are not arbitrary. They are a matter of life and death. The park balances the public's desire for access against the unforgiving reality of a wilderness that will kill you casually and without malice. A geyser that boils you alive, a bear that sees you as a threat, or a sudden freak snowstorm in June. On June 29, 2026, just days before the Independence Day holiday rush, a rare summer blizzard swept through the park. It dumped feet of heavy, wet snow on the high mountain passes. The NPs had no choice. They closed Dunraven Pass. They closed the Beartooth Highway. Thousands of vacation plans were thrown into chaos. Online, the frustration was immediate. Why can't they just plow it? They closed the roads because a foot of snow at 9,000 feet with near zero visibility is a death trap. Because your rental sedan with all-season tires is no match for a whiteout blizzard on a mountain pass with no guardrails. The closure isn't the problem. The closure is the solution to a much bigger problem. The park isn't hiding anything. It's trying to keep you from becoming a statistic. And yet, some parts of Yellowstone seem determined to become statistics themselves. For 2 years after the 2024 explosion, Biscuit Basin remained silent, closed, studied, and monitored. Scientists from the USGS and the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory installed new equipment, trying to understand the forces that led to the blast. They knew the area was unstable. They had no idea what was coming next. The story of Biscuit Basin's modern violence doesn't start in 2024. It starts on August 17, 1959, at 11:37 p.m., a massive 7.2 magnitude earthquake centered at nearby Hebgen Lake ripped through the region. The ground shook so violently it triggered a landslide that dammed the Madison River, killing 28 people. In Yellowstone, the quake was a cataclysmic replumbing event. Geysers that had been dormant for years roared to life. Others went extinct overnight. In Biscuit Basin, the epicenter of the chaos was Sapphire Pool. Before the quake, it was known for the unique, biscuit-like mineral formations that surrounded its edge, giving the basin its name. The earthquake changed everything. The shaking caused the hot spring to erupt violently, not once, but continuously, for hours. The force of the eruptions was so great it completely destroyed the namesake biscuits, blowing them to dust. They have never returned. The basin's name is now a memorial to a feature that no longer exists. The 1959 earthquake proved that the plumbing beneath Yellowstone was fragile and interconnected. A shock in one place could have dramatic, unpredictable consequences miles away. The ground in Biscuit Basin had a memory of violence. After the quake, Sapphire Pool became hotter, clearer, and more eruptive. The entire basin was put on notice. Minor hydrothermal events were recorded there for decades, including a small explosion in 2009. They were warnings, tremors before the main shock. After the dramatic 2024 explosion, a nervous peace settled over the area. It was closed, but it was being watched. Heavily, seismic sensors, acoustic infrasound detectors, GPS monitors, and time-lapse cameras were all pointed at the new crater where Black Diamond Pool used to be. Scientists were determined not to be surprised again. The ground had other plans. Just a quick reminder, we see the statistics. Tens of thousands of you are watching, but only a fraction are subscribed. If you've made it this far into the inner workings of Yellowstone, you're clearly one of us. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next investigation. It is the single best way to ensure we can keep making these deep dives. The first sign that something was wrong again came on May 31st, 2026. A newly installed USGS webcam, there to monitor the now infamous crater, caught it. A sudden, muddy eruption, 20 or 30 feet high. A brief, violent burp from the system. It was a clear indication that the pressure was building again. The subterranean dragon was stirring. 2 weeks later, the dragon awoke. On June 13th, 2026, at 5:09 in the morning, the monitoring equipment screamed. Another localized hydrothermal explosion had occurred at the exact same spot. Because the area was still closed from the 2024 event, no one was there. No one was hurt. But the data that flooded into the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory told a story of escalating violence. This was not a repeat of 2024. This was something new. The explosion tore a 61-foot fissure in the ground, a crack in the earth, venting steam and boiling water. 3 new vent groups formed around the fissure, furiously discharging water between 185 and 200 degrees Fahrenheit. The eruption was so powerful, it fundamentally rewrote the local topography in a matter of minutes. The first clue for rangers on the ground wasn't a sound or a tremor. It was the Firehole River. Downstream from Biscuit Basin, the river, normally crystal clear, had turned a shocking, opaque, milky gray. It was choked with a massive volume of fine clay and silica sediment, flushed out of the ground by the explosion. The river itself was telling them that something violent had happened upstream. The 2026 event, the scientists at the WIVO wrote, emphasizes the dynamic and hazardous nature of hydrothermal activity in the region. It was professional, scientific understatement. What it really meant was, we thought we were watching it. We had it surrounded by every instrument we have, and it still surprised us. It still did something we didn't expect. When researchers were finally able to get close to the blast site in late June, they found something that wasn't there before. Near the middle of the new 61-foot fissure cluster, a brand new pool of boiling water had formed. Born in violence, it now shimmered in the morning light, a raw, open wound on the landscape. The park was not healing. It was actively tearing itself open. This is the reality of Yellowstone that the tourist brochures leave out. The ground is not static. The map is not final. You are visiting a place that is being created and destroyed in real time. The same heat engine that powers Old Faithful and paints grand prismatic spring with impossible colors is also capable of tearing the ground apart without warning. The closures in Yellowstone feel like a secret because they represent a truth we are uncomfortable with. That nature is not safe, it is not predictable, and it is entirely indifferent to our presence. A park ranger closing a road is not an act of concealment, it is an act of translation. He is translating the violent, chaotic language of geology into the only language our species seems to understand. A barrier. A locked gate. A simple, emphatic no. The closures protect us from the park. They also protect the park from us. Every time a bear management area is closed, it's a victory for the grizzlies. Every time a spawning stream is put off limits, it's a victory for the trout. The park is a living system with rhythms and needs that have nothing to do with human vacation schedules. Sometimes, the most responsible form of management is to get out of the way. All right, I know I've mentioned it, but I have to ask one last time. You've been here for almost the entire story. You are clearly part of the core community. If you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? An engraved invitation from a geyser? Hit the button. Please, it actually matters to us, and it guarantees you won't miss what's coming next. The future of Biscuit Basin is uncertain. It remains closed. The new fissure steams continuously, a permanent reminder of the power unleashed in June 2026. Scientists like Jamie Farrell, the chief seismologist at the University of Utah Seismograph Stations, are analyzing the terabytes of data from the event, trying to build a better predictive model. But they are modeling chaos. The uncomfortable truth is that there may not be a pattern. The system may be too complex, the variables too numerous. That silica plug doesn't announce itself. The pressure builds in silence. The failure comes without warning. The next hydrothermal explosion in Yellowstone won't happen in a closed, monitored basin filled with scientific instruments. It will happen on a Tuesday morning in a thermal area that was considered stable, under a boardwalk crowded with families. That is the statistical reality. The rangers who close these areas are not hiding a secret. They are standing guard on the border of a world that operates on a different timescale and with a different set of rules. They are the thin line between the four. 8 million people who come to see the beauty and the ancient, violent forces that created it. The next time you see a road closed sign in Yellowstone, don't ask what they are hiding. Ask what they are protecting you from. The answer is written in the steam, rising from a 61